The first snow fell the morning Clara Hensley buried her husband. It drifted soft and silent across the Kansas prairie, settling on the weather-beaten coffin as if the sky itself were trying to offer mercy where life had not. Clara stood rigid beside the grave, gloved hands clenched around a wilted black rose she had picked from the frozen garden behind their farmhouse, the same garden her husband, Matthew, used to tend every spring, humming tunelessly while the wind carried dust and sunlight across the fields. Now the wind only carried cold. Her small house stood behind her on the ridge, gray boards sagging, shutters crooked, chimney cracked from years of neglect and storms they never had money to fix. The barn leaned like an exhausted old horse. The fields lay barren, the soil too dry, too stubborn, too unforgiving, just like the world had become. Clara was 27 years old and already felt ancient. She had buried her parents when she was young. Buried a child born too early. Now she buried the man who had sworn to grow old with her under these endless skies. The preacher's voice faded into the wind. Neighbors murmured soft condolences, hats clutched to chests, boots shifting in the frost. They left quickly, winter was coming hard, and no one lingered long in sorrow when survival demanded movement. When the last wagon disappeared down the dirt road, Clara remained. She dropped the rose onto the coffin. "I tried," she whispered to the earth. "God knows I tried." Matthew had died coughing blood into their sheets, lungs ruined by dust and years of breathing storms off the plains. The doctor came too late. The medicine cost too much. The crops failed anyway. Everything failed. She walked back to the house alone. Inside, the silence roared. Matthew's boots still sat by the door. His coat hung on the peg behind it. His half-finished chair waited in the corner, wood shavings scattered across the floor like frozen memories. Clara sank onto the bed and pressed her face into the quilt she'd stitched when they were newly married, bright patches, hopeful colors. She did not cry. She had already cried herself empty. 3 days later, the bank notice came. Final warning. Mortgage overdue. Land scheduled for auction in 60 days. She stared at the paper until the words blurred. 60 days. The winter would kill the cattle before the debt ever did. That night she went to the barn and counted again. 2 cows too thin. 1 horse with a limp. Chickens barely laying. Grain bins nearly empty. She rested her forehead against the stall door. "I can't," she whispered to no one. "I can't do this alone." The answer came in the form of hoofbeats the following afternoon. Clara was chopping frozen turnips when she heard them, slow, steady, deliberate. Not hurried. Not careless. She stepped onto the porch. A lone rider approached along the fence line. His horse was dark as ink, breath steaming in the cold. The man sat tall but loose in the saddle, long coat draped around broad shoulders, hat brim shadowing his eyes. He stopped at the gate, removed his hat, and waited. Didn't shout. Didn't ride up without permission. Just waited. Clara tightened her shawl and walked down. "Yes?" His voice, when he spoke, was quiet. Deep. Careful. "Afternoon, ma'am. Name's Eli Mercer. I run cattle west of here." He nodded toward the barn. "Saw your fences down along the creek. Thought I'd mention it before your livestock wander." Clara blinked. No one warned anyone of anything anymore. Folks barely kept their own heads above water. "Thank you," she said. He studied the land, not greedily, not appraising, but with something closer to concern. "Looks like you've had a rough season." She stiffened. "That obvious?" He met her eyes then. Gray eyes. Calm. Sad in a way that felt familiar. "I buried my brother last year," he said simply. "Grief leaves marks." Her breath caught. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Silence stretched. Most men filled silence with questions. Eli didn't. Finally he tipped his hat. "I'll send one of my hands by tomorrow to help patch the fence. No charge. I can't pay." He raised a hand gently. "Didn't ask for it." Then he turned his horse and rode away. Clara stood in the cold long after he disappeared. She didn't know why, but the ache in her chest had shifted. Just a little. Eli Mercer came back the next morning with wire, posts, and 2 quiet ranch hands who worked without chatter and left before noon. He stayed. Not to talk. To hammer. He worked with sleeves rolled, gloves worn thin, movements economical and patient. When Clara brought coffee, he accepted with a nod. "Thank you. Nothing else." But somehow, the barn felt warmer with another heartbeat in it. Over the next weeks, he appeared again and again. Once with feed. Once with a vet for the lame horse. Once just to check the fence. Always with excuses. Never with pity. Clara didn't ask why. She didn't trust kindness anymore. But loneliness is a stubborn hunger. And Eli, quiet, steady Eli, didn't try to fix her. He didn't push her to smile. Didn't tell her she'd be fine. He just stayed. One evening, a blizzard rolled in without warning. White swallowed the world. Clara's roof began to leak, snow drifting through the cracked shingles. She climbed the ladder to patch it and slipped. The fall knocked the breath from her chest. Pain flared in her ankle. She screamed into the wind. Through the blur of snow, she saw a rider. Eli. He dismounted before the horse stopped. "Clara." He scooped her up without hesitation, coat wrapping around her as though instinct alone guided him. Inside, he built the fire higher. Bound her ankle with practiced hands. "You shouldn't have been up there alone. I don't have a choice." "You do now." She laughed weakly. "No, I don't." His jaw tightened. "You're not meant to carry the whole world by yourself." She stared at the flames. "I used to think marriage meant safety," she whispered. "Then death took everything." Eli was quiet a long moment. "Then, love doesn't vanish just because the person's gone." She looked at him. "It doesn't?" "No. It leaves pieces behind. Sometimes they're heavy." He hesitated. "Sometimes, they're waiting for somewhere new to land." Her throat burned. He stood abruptly. "I'll check the horses." But his voice wasn't steady. When the storm ended 2 days later, he helped her file paperwork for an emergency loan through the ranchers' cooperative. Brought a carpenter friend to fix the roof. Taught her how to rotate feed to make it last. Slowly. The land breathed again. So did she. One night in early spring, green finally breaking through the frost, she found him repairing the fence under a sky-streaked pink and gold. "You don't have to keep coming," she said. "I know." "Then why do you?" He stopped working. "Because I wake up thinking about you," he did not say. Instead. "Because I like this place." She folded her arms. "You hate wheat fields." He smiled. "A real one this time." "Maybe I changed my mind." They stood in the wind. Then he said quietly, "Bank's not taking your land. Cooperative bought the note. You've got 5 years. Her knees nearly buckled. "Oh, Eli." She pressed her face into her hands. He touched her arm. Not possessive. Not demanding. Just there. She looked up at him, tears streaking dirt from her cheeks. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did." "How?" "You let me be here." The spring dance in town came a month later. Clara almost didn't go. But she did. And Eli waited by the door like he'd been doing it his whole life. When he held her during the slow song, she realized something terrifying. She didn't feel broken. She felt alive. Afterward, beneath lantern light and wide stars, he cleared his throat. "I'm not good at speeches. I noticed." He smiled. "I'm not asking you to forget him." Her breath stilled. "I'd never. I'm asking, if someday, you might let me love what's left." The prairie stretched endless around them. Once, that had frightened her. Now it felt like room to breathe. She slipped her hand into his. "I think," she said softly, "that's exactly what I need." He squeezed gently. "Like something precious." Studio microphone narrator closing for YouTube. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe for more frontier romances, quiet cowboys, and powerful tales of love that rises from loss. New stories every week, don't miss the next one.